The next concept that we're going to review is classes. While newer versions of React tend not to use a lot of classes, it's still important to be comfortable with classes to use React. When you see most React codes, especially the ones that use versions below version 16, they will use classes a lot, so it's useful to be comfortable with classes to understand React. In JavaScript, as we've seen, we can define a class as follows. So let's say we have a class shape. A class can have a constructor, which you can think of it as the function that gets executed when the class is created or instantiated. So we can have something like this. And a class can have a method. So we can have something like this. So maybe, so we have a class shape and there's a method area, something like that. And to use this class, we can create an instance of class. So we can say the square is a new shape, and we can pass some properties to it. So in this case, we can say it has a sides of 4 sides, something like that. And that's a square. So we can say square the area. That's not going to do anything because we don't have any implementation for it. Okay, that's yeah, exactly. So that's going to be undefined because it doesn't do anything. For now, we can just say not implemented. So if we call that, then that's just going to actually, we don't need to do console.log. So we can just call the area method of the square object, and that will just print not implemented. Pretty straightforward. We can also create a class that extends another class. So we can have a class square that extends shape, and we can have this also have its own constructor, and we can, the first thing we need to do is we can call super, which just calls the parents constructor, and in this case we can get the length from the props. So we can assume that the props are going to be an object that has the length, and so maybe we have this set the sides, so props does the sides, and then we can override the implementation that the base class or the parent class provide. So we can say area in this case will be this dot length square. So now what we can do is we can replace this with a shape. So we can create a new square. Square is a new square, and then we know we can pass the sides as 4 sides, and you can say the length is 5. So this props is just an object that has some properties, and it has 2 properties or 2 attributes, sides and length. And now we can print out, so we can say console.log square area. So like, what's the area of the square? Let's run that and let's see what that returns. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, yeah, we need to pass the props there. All right, so we have a class shape. It has a constructor that is an object of properties, and it has a method area that by default doesn't have any implementation. And we have a class square that extends shape, and in the constructor for the square class, it takes a property, and then we just pass that property to the parent, so the parent can also instantiate correctly. And we get the length property from the argument to the constructor, and we set it to property of the instance. So in this case, the instance is going to have the length, and we provide an implementation for the method area that the base class provides. So here we can create an instance of a square, and we just pass in this props, and we can call the area method to get the area of the square. And we can also access the other properties as well. So we can say square the length, that should give us 5, and we can say square dot the sides, and that should give us 4. Okay, so it's also possible for a subclass, in this case square, to define a method that doesn't exist on the base class, right? So we can say something like maybe the perimeter, for example. So this could just be this dot length times 4. We can have another method, say info, that just returns an object. Okay, and we can just provide this and the area is this area. So if we call this the info, that should return an object that has the area and the perimeter. And what square the info is doing is it's called this method, and this method returns an object, and the properties of the object is just the perimeter, which we're calling a method that will define, as well as we're calling the area, which is defined in the base class shape, but we are overriding it, meaning we are providing a new implementation that's different from what the original class shape provides. And that's pretty much all you need to know as far as classes go. Is this how we define classes? There's a constructor, and you can extend classes, and you can provide methods that either override some implementation in the base class, or it's just a new method that you define that either the client in this case can call, or you can also call within the class itself. So in this case, we have the info method calling 2 other methods that are part of the class itself, being area and perimeter. So we'll be talking about spread operators next.